welcome to the Pirates Fan Forum here on DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. I'm your host, Gary Morgan. With me, as always, is my good friend, Jim Stamm. Jim, how do you intro a show when your team just stinks?
It's been a hell of a week, or maybe a hell of a couple weeks. That's a great question. And you know what? I think we've both had some time to sit back and think about it. And I think we're going to have some pretty good insight on this today. So I hope people have tuned in and I hope they stick with it.
Well, let's start with something I think we probably overlook when we're talking about all the ups and downs of players. Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about culture. So, creating a culture only happens when the example is set at the executive level. So you have to start with Bob. Bob's a guy that thinks he only has to talk when something good happens. Signed Brian Hayes to a record-setting contract. Now I'll come talk to the people because something notably good has happened. Never spend money unless the attrition of arbitration forces your hand. It leads to executives who fear losing prospects and fear an extension that doesn't work out more than they fear losing. Everything that the top does affects the next level down, all the way down to coaches. Culture's not being built here in Pittsburgh. We can worry about where the system is, and rightly we should. But I worry much more that culture has not changed. And I feel like we put a little bit too much trust in Travis Williams and Ben Cherington's ability to do so. Because we all still have that elephant in the room of Bob Nutting. And if he doesn't change or show that something's changing, I think we're going to see the culture kind of stand still. What do you think?
Yeah. Hey, the first thing that pops into my mind when you say that is and I know we have a lot of people here in Pittsburgh that listen to the show, but we also have a lot of people that are from elsewhere, and maybe they're just Pirate fans and whatever. So
California is especially well represented.
Yeah. So they may not be familiar with this aspect, but what I was going to mention is you take a look at like the Pitt football team and what Pat Narduzzi has done there, and all you hear about, and I'm talking like not just from them, I'm talking like players, families, and people that cover the team and people outside that have to, interact with the team. They talk about culture, and how it's changed and how it's shifted and how much of an effort that is taking and has taken in a place where many of the things we talk about that ail the Pirates ail the Pitt football program. Absolutely. And it takes a huge undertaking to do that. And so it's the first thing that hit me is like, it's not impossible. It's hard, but it can be done. And I think there are a lot of signs here that just, it's hard to act like you've been there when you've never been there. Right. And I think that is where kind of we are with the Bob Nutting situation and what kind of trickles down. Does that make sense?
It does, because, I've often said, I don't think that he could walk down, General Robinson Street handing out $100 bills to people and have any of the people that received a $100 bill call him a good owner if they were interviewed 5 minutes later by someone from ESPN.
It'd be a cool story for him. That's about it.
Point is, I don't think that any gesture he really has to give is going to be received well enough by the fan base to affect any kind of a change on the way he is. It's a long-term process for him to get respect back. That doesn't mean that he can't start doing things a little differently. Maybe tell Ben Cherington, instead of waiting for him to decide it, tell him you'd like to start locking up players. It would be good for PR, if nothing else. there are ways that he can affect some change there. He can talk to the media more often. And you may not like what he has to say, but I always respect someone that at least come out and talk, at least come out and tell your story, at least come out and explain yourself.
Sure. Hey, there are other owners in baseball that have taken that approach. I think you've seen Cohen with the Mets do it, and you've seen Milwaukee, and they've been very communicative with their fans.
Very. We just talked about that a couple weeks ago. That was
Right.
refreshing in a way. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you saw what the Orioles GM said the other day. I mean, he gave some really clear thoughts on how they were going to approach things. And
Yeah.
I mean, and spend, and that most of it was still going to come from arbitration type escalating, the payroll. But they were going to go out and try to target some things. And, so those are the things that, like, you would hope to see. You mentioned about Travis Williams. What, I want to go the Office Space meme here, which is, what would you say it is you do here? And, that's kind of where we're at with him sometimes. Like, I assume he's a busy man, but it certainly hasn't been what I am envisioned his role being, Gary.
Yeah, and I
At
think
least occasionally.
The things that you can attribute to Travis Williams right now that are tangible really are the new bars in the outfield, the standing room only stuff, the new kids play area, the big bobbleheads out there, naming things after famous home run calls out in the outfield, that kind of stuff, the fan experience aspect.
Which has been great, by the way.
Opening up those month-long tickets for standing room only for like $20-some, I think, was another one of his initiatives. Actually seen it have some effect with the kids, which is why it makes sense to have the new Kitty Land out there.
They've been great improvements, but
that's the kind of stuff he's working on, and I think a lot of us thought he was going to come in and just help communicate a little better, especially coming from the Penguins. That's what I thought too. So I've been disappointed by that, but I don't see that changing. I think it's pretty clear what his role is. And he has absolutely no fingers in the baseball player pie. He has nothing to do with how much is spent. He has nothing to do with any of that. They've made that a very clear delineation. So you have Bob Nutting. And the only thing he could really do is come out and directly say, I've authorized spending. Ben Cherington isn't spending right now because Ben Cherington doesn't think it's the way he wants to pull this build off. But he's allowed. If there's a guy he wants, he can go get him.
Yeah, that's a great point. Something just as simple as that.
And maybe that's not true. Maybe it really is Bob. But I'm just saying, if it's not, come out and say it. Because I'm not saying that everybody will believe you. In fact, probably won't. But come out, be on the record, throw it over the wall at your GM. Let your GM have to explain why he has chosen not to right now, even by way of outlining a little bit of what you're thinking.
Yeah, well, and if it's true that it is Bob, well, then I would ask then two questions: is why is Ben Cherington still here? I sure wouldn't be.
Yeah.
If I was him, and two, I mean, then he wasn't being told the truth when he took the job. So I tend to agree that it is right now Ben Cherington. Whatever that, look, we're not talking $100 million here of extra payroll.
Not at this point, but the point is, when
whatever it is.
Yeah, when we go, oh, hey, it was great Quintana did well for a month. But maybe next year let's spend a little more than $2 million. What do you say? I want to know whose decision that is. I want to know, is Ben doing that because Ben thinks if I got an expensive pitcher, it would slow something down? Because I think that's delusional. But I also don't want to believe that it's Bob telling him he can't spend $5.
What you're saying right now, and then we'll get to break, but what you're saying right there is, I don't think that's unreasonable to ask.
I don't either.
We're not asking for the trade secrets and the nuclear launch codes of what you want to do. That's a simple thing you can kind of establish and let the fans know a little bit more about what your thought process is.
Yeah, accountability dies in the dark. So I'm saying light this puppy up.
Yep.
Let's take a quick break. Let's come back. Let's talk about another announcer trying to hold the Pirates accountable. And we're back from the Pirates Fan Forum here on DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. Gary and Jim with you. Sorry we went a little long in the first segment, but we got all off on our soapboxes about the Pirates not building a culture here. And one would think, Jim, after all this time, we would have been long past over that.
Hey, when you're having a good segment, it's hard to shut it down, and we just had a good segment, so...
It really is. So let's have a little fun. Let's join the fray with everybody else who has an opinion on the Dennis Eckersley comments. For those of you that don't know, I would like the address of your rock so I can send a Christmas card. But Dennis Eckersley on the broadcast the other day, and a lot of people heard it because that was MLB's choice for the
perfect
timing. For the broadcast. During the game, he said, "You talk about a no-name lineup. There's no team like this. This is a hodgepodge of nothingness. It's ridiculous. It really is pathetic." Now, he was talking about the Pittsburgh Pirates, not your wife's cooking.
And he is a Red Sox announcer. Just
not your golf game.
Yes.
He was talking about the Pittsburgh Pirates, and there was a range of reactions. I mean, people on Twitter were doing everything from hating Eckersley for saying it to thinking it was absurd that an opposition announcer would do that.
It's crazy, isn't it? How much it got? Like, man,
it was all over the place. And then of course, half of Pirates Twitter completely agreed with the comments and felt that they were warranted and acceptable and wondrous. So, as usual, I probably don't really fall into any of those buckets. I think that Eckersley's comments were weird. I've really not often heard opposition announcers do that sort of thing. I don't think there was anything wrong with what he said, but I think his targets were really the management and the ownership, and he kind of went after the players. And there's supposed to be a little bit of a brotherhood there with ex-players, especially Hall of Fame ex-players. They tend to be a little bit more demure about that sort of thing. So I was a little bothered by it. I certainly don't see him as a hero, but I don't care. What do you think, Jim?
It was incredible to see the legs that thing had. It just, the spokes on it were all over the place, and you kind of covered it from fans.
It was crazy. I was more entertained watching social media than I was even formulating my own opinion about the comments. I didn't even bother saying anything until the next day because I was like, I'm not touching this right now. I'm just going to sit back and watch.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I was actually at the game. So I'm seeing Twitter just, explode, right? My timeline, everything. And I didn't
people throwing hot dogs up at the broadcast booth or what was going on?
It was, the game was a little rough. The Pirates got one hit through the first 7 innings. So, maybe I'm glad I didn't read it and listen to it then because maybe I would have bought into it a little more. But so then I finally got home, and that's whenever I have time to sit there and kind of look at things. And, there are just certain things at the ballpark you can't do. And I read it, I listened to it, saw some reactions to it. I just kind of shrugged. I thought it was, like you said, a little weird and maybe misguided. Like he was.
Yeah.
But overall, did he have a point? Yeah. Is it anything really that I don't think everybody hasn't at one time or another thought about kind of sometimes what the Pirates are doing with their lineups?
Well, what did you think of the angle to it where that Greg Brown immediately went with the next day? Because Greg Brown, lightning rod that he is, was on the fan, and I guess he said that basically Eckersley had no right to say that because the Pirates were in better shape than the Red Sox, which is insane because they have a great farm system, which the Red Sox do too. And and because the Pirates' payroll is so much lower, it's okay that they're where they are. But Boston being in last place in the AL East with the sixth highest payroll is ridiculous.
Well, I
Which
would say, go ahead.
I'm sure Boston fans would agree. But that just means you spent your money poorly and you've been really injured, right? So
Yeah, see, that's where me and Greg will have to, take different forks in the road because I look at it like you don't get to talk about teams and those payroll things that he immediately jumped to if you're part of an organization that I don't feel has honestly tried to do everything they can do to win over the years. And like you said with Boston, is it ain't for lack of trying. It
right,
ain't for
right.
lack of spending. If it doesn't work, it's because whatever they could do, they are trying to do it. So that's where I have a little problem with Greg going there is you can't always say that about the Pirates. We know that. There have been times where they
You
could
can't
have done
you
more.
can't say it even this year. I mean, we don't even need
Right.
to go back in history.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so that's where I don't like going there. If you're the Tampa Bay Rays and you want to say that and you're a announcer for them, then I get it.
Well, to be fair, Greg, he called a couple World Series championships this year already when they swept LA and the Dodgers or
Uh-huh.
out there, and when they swept the Yankees. Those were World Series championships, really. I mean, according to Greg, because that to him that those small market teams or the teams that spend like the Pirates, which he's only got a couple other choices should he ever leave. They when they beat Goliath, boy, I mean that's where it's at. So I mean, for him, he's kind of already got that edge to him anyway. So I would expect
Sure.
his comments to be right in that realm, right?
Yeah.
And he's a homer.
Predictable.
He's a homer.
Predictable.
I mean, he's a
Yeah.
homer. He lives here. He works here. This is his team. But as far as Eckersley goes, I don't care. I personally would prefer that no announcers would really be talking like that about anybody's team, really. But and like I would find it distasteful if Greg Brown did it to the Reds on Thursday, and I hate the Reds. So
Well, it's an interesting dynamic too. This is something that I thought of, and I did want to ask you about because baseball has a little bit of a different dynamic, doesn't it? Because with these announcers being employees of the teams, and then also a lot of them being former players, there seems to be a different kind of code in baseball. Because I think when we watch like the NFL and NHL, and there's guys that are paid to analyze things, and they bring in their own broadcast teams, it seems as a little bit more acceptable. But
yeah,
there seems to be a line that was crossed here, and players big time did not like it. Which, as a player, I get it, and I loved the responses. If you don't respond like that as a player, then I would suggest that you might want to look inward too.
you're
It
mainly talking about Brian Reynolds
Will Crow,
and
Brian
Will Crow.
Reynolds.
Yeah,
I think maybe someone else had a comment about it.
Will Crow's was rather expletive laced.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So
he had it.
it was just there was a different dynamic to it that it surprised me a little bit, and it got me thinking about just how different it is in the sports than in baseball. It seemed really kind of like a taboo thing to do.
I mean, so the other thing that it really leads you to is, he is right. It's a lot of no-name players, but I mean, part of that is a lot of them are very young players. So, of course,
Yeah,
you're not going to know who they are. So,
misguided is what I was saying about
yeah.
some of it.
So, realistically, what does this team do the rest of the year here if we were to at least sit back and go, okay, we're developing kids. What would you have them do? Because technically, I could tell you they shouldn't play Ben Gamble anymore because they've got kids they need to audition. Like, shouldn't we be watching Travis Swaggerty? Realistically,
You asking or is that rhetorical?
I'm asking. Like, these are the kind of conversations I think we need to have about the roster because all I see are complaints about the lineup. I totally get it. But who goes, who stays, who comes up? Because we're not making a trade now.
No.
So the team is the team. So what are we doing? Who do you want to see
Indeed.
go? Who have you seen enough of?
Me personally, I mean, I think that you've got the obvious answers.
That there's a reasonable replacement for, because I think we could both go into catcher, but
Mhm.
you know, for what they have to offer, Jason DeLay and Tyler Heineman are what they've got. There
Yeah,
isn't
yeah.
anybody better at AAA. There isn't anybody ready from AA. I wouldn't advise bringing up Endy or Henry.
And trust me,
So,
there is not a thinner group of free agents to go after and look at or fringe guys than there are at major league catcher. If there's anybody that has a pulse, he is on a team. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
it's
And
just,
when you see the alternative too, when you don't, there it's Godoy.
oh man,
So
yeah,
I'm just saying, like, that's what there is right now.
right,
Let's just pretend free agents and waiver claims aren't going to come up. Just
yeah,
focus
yeah.
on what we have.
Well, I mean, I think
So
we're
when we have the caveat that you have to be able to replace it reasonably with somebody that you think could be better, where do we go? Who's got enough? Van Meter's the obvious choice. Who comes up for him?
well, it depends on even what you want to say he's doing. I mean, is he even, he's such a
Let's just say bat for bat.
okay. So not necessarily even worrying about
He's barely playing realistically, so
right.
it doesn't really matter what position it is.
I mean, I it's a little puzzling to me. Like a Swaggerty's not back up here, and we're not seeing anything with him. I would have hoped we would have seen Bay by now, but he's been hurt, and
Yeah,
so
right.
that has derailed things a little bit. Um, they've done the back and forth with Cal Mitchell a little bit now. I don't even know what he's done since he went back down. So I don't even know if there's a reason,
He's
to,
hitting okay again.
okay.
I mean, like he's an okay hitter. I mean, I think he maxes out as like a 260 hitter
Yeah,
in major leagues. So I wouldn't expect him to earth shatter anybody.
right,
You know,
right. Um, I mean, I'm glad Castro is back up. He's actually
he's been one
looked
of their
a
better hitters recently.
yeah, he's looked like a little bit better, different of a player, all things aside. But you've got um, Bly Madris is really really struggling.
He really is.
Um,
I mean, so I have to ask. Mason Martin has struggled all season long. There's your first base prospect. I don't think he's ready. I don't
he's
think
not.
Nunez is ready.
I think if you called Mason Martin up to face Major League pitching, it would be a disaster. I think he's still that far away.
Yeah, so I'm not sure there's much to be done there. It almost feels like it's going to be just Bly and Chavis, but wouldn't it be nice to just see them give Chavis a run? He's actually started handling right-handers a little better recently. Maybe let's just let him play. Let him be the majority guy. Let him play 5 days. Maybe we've decided he's a platoon player before we knew. Let's see.
I don't have a problem with it. Like you said, I don't know what especially at that position, what are your options?
Right.
Um,
Kevin Newman's doing pretty well. No reason to do anything there. Good
mhm.
chance they're going to pick up his first year of arbitration too. O'Neill Cruz, I don't know. He's under 200 again. Um,
Yeah,
I don't know that I would send him down. I don't think there's anything else for him to conquer down there. But I do think that somebody has to harness his swing. I heard he's even bringing in a private scout, or a private coach
Yeah.
that he uses.
Well, I don't know if you saw the Neil Walker comments about Cruz,
No, what
and
did he say?
he was, pretty. It was pretty forthcoming. He just said, "I'm seeing a guy who's just not making any adjustments." Just flat out. I thought he was very candid with his comments, perhaps even surprisingly so, that he's just not making any adjustments. And it doesn't appear that he is trying to.
I'm not sure I agree with that. I mean,
Yeah.
I trust his
Well,
eye. I
that
trust his eye. I do, but I'm not sure that I'm seeing the same thing. I
this
feel
was
like
this
I
was
feel
two
like
days ago in the Trib, I think, is where he had those comments.
I totally believe you, and I totally trust that Neil sees what Neil sees, and
Yeah.
everyone should lean towards him as far as who's right. I'm just saying I don't see that. I've seen him make a couple adjustments, and I actually think they've been detrimental adjustments because
I'd like.
it's been more of an adjustment to his approach, and swinging the bat fewer times is not good for a kid that just needs to make contact 1 out of 3 swings.
Mhm. Well, we've talked about this too before. Is approach can mean a lot of things. Are you talking about pitch approach? How you're handling your at bat, or are you talking about uh, swing approach and things of that nature? So those can be two very different things.
Right.
I'll
So
have
I'm
to go
seeing
back and
adjustments,
look
but
at
I'm
it.
not seeing mechanical adjustments. I'm seeing just adjustments in general. And I think
Mhm.
they've been bad. For like, if I'm training that kid right now and I want to make him usable while I'm training him, right now, a bad at bat for me from O'Neill Cruz is one in which he doesn't swing the bat 3 times. So I don't think he should be taking a strike that doesn't get swung at because he
Meaning
can
you're
cover
saying
the
he's
plate.
not swinging enough.
No, not at all.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just making sure.
He's taking way too many strikes, and he needs to be swinging at strikes. That's what he needs to be, hunting strike zone early.
Early. Yeah. I mean,
Yes,
he once, I mean,
but
we
they've
already
made him
know.
too tentative.
I
They've
know,
preached
Gary.
against it, and they've made him too tentative, and they're in his head. So at this point, you may have to consider that he might have to go back down. And I know this place is going to lose their mind, and they're going to start quoting RBI numbers and home run totals, and I completely get that. But the kid is not right. He's just very talented, and he's overcoming not being right. You can make this kid into a real superstar if this team has the right training in place. And I can't say they do, but I can
It's a
say the
real
major league hitting approach and the coach is not helping him.
No, it's a real tough call right now with him, I think. Part of me wants to see him fight through it at this level, but there's another part of me that says, is man, he is really struggling. He's up over, I think, like 42% K rate now, and we've got what, maybe 40 or 50 games left. Um, how long would you let this go looking like that? I don't know. I think it's a real tough question. Um, so yeah,
I mean, I lean keep him up here just because I don't think he's going to see the type of breaking pitches in AAA that are really going to challenge him. And
I tend to agree with you.
I do think they need to stop sitting him against lefties periodically. I think they need to just leave him in there and let him see more and more pitching. I don't
I
care
agree.
what it is. I
I
wouldn't
agree. I
take
would
him
run him
out.
out there. I would run him out there and say, dude, just don't think about it.
Yeah.
Just go out and try to play, be aggressive, take advantage of some of his natural abilities.
It's been a long
Um,
time since we've seen that smile from coming around second base, right?
yeah, yeah,
The kid's not having a good time right now. So when we talk about like sending him down, of course he isn't going to want to get sent down. Of course it's not fun. But that kid is not enjoying his life right now. That's not the kid that came up here. That's a kid that has gotten punched in the face by Major League Baseball.
hmm Yeah, he's fighting through some things right now,
Yeah,
or trying to.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, even so, even when we get there, like I think where you're going with all this is like, look, the lineups that are getting released, they're not where they need to be, and no one's happy with seeing the lineups right now. But
true.
aside from a couple options of guys that I think I'd love to see, like we've already talked about with Swaggerty and Bay if he gets healthy here and gets right.
Sawinski. I wouldn't mind seeing
Sawinski, you would
Sawinski
love
come back
back to
up.
see, but those are the guys, right? I don't know that we're talking about anybody else, are we? Certainly, and it's
That's
certainly not on a pitching side of things. I mean,
well. See, I could see somebody like Michael Burrows maybe getting a cameo at the end of the year or something
that's
like that.
fine. I meant more, like now till the end. Like, I
Right.
don't see that being a thing.
What I'm mostly worried about is guys that are borderline 40 man people. Like we talked about, maybe it's time to send Bly down. We kind of glazed over it. I guess for me, I feel like Bly needs to just get till the end of the season, and this is his audition to prove whether he's worth a 40-man spot or not.
Yeah.
And if he fails, he fails. If he has an epic bad cold streak that lasts until October, man, I'm sorry, dude. You know,
Yeah,
but they're gonna
it's
have to move on because those spots are precious. You
and
know,
he's not a young cat,
right? And they
so it'd
already
be
had
time.
too many outfielders to begin with. So
Right.
you've got other people that you're gonna have to start looking into making sure you hold on to. And I just think that's what I'd be using this year for. Just checking those boxes. Like I'd want to get Cody Bolton up here in the bullpen because he's been kind of floating between starting and bullpen.
Hmm.
I'd want to get him up here and let him play in the bullpen, get him on the 40 man, at least make it that kind of decision.
Right.
Because if you
Well,
leave
let
him
me.
exposed, he will get taken.
Right. Well, let me throw out one more name that we didn't talk about, and where because he is another one that you kind of have to make a decision on at some point. What do you think about Greg Allen at this point? Yes, no.
Yes, so far, man, unimpressed. He has some bursts where, like, he almost has, like, I could take over a game if I want to, like, in him.
Yeah,
He's got a little bit of pop. He can drive it to the gap. He gets it out there. He's going to take 2 or 3 bases on you. He
sure.
gets a single. He could turn it into a double. He's almost stolen home a couple times. I mean, he's worked his way into being in that position in the first place. So he's super exciting when he gets on base. Just don't get on base enough. Needs to either draw more walks or really embrace bunting because, that's a way he could get on more quickly.
Yeah,
But
and I was looking too. Like, he's 29.
right.
He'll be 30 by the time spring training rolls around.
The only reason I was interested in him at all is because if they're going to lose Ben Gamel, he's a nice, cheap, replaceable veteran right there.
Hmm.
That switch hitter gives you a little bit of flexibility. He's a good bench outfielder.
Well, wait a second. I thought we were getting Andrew McCutcheon back. I thought that was the latest thing on Twitter today when I started posting all his stats for the.
Andrew trying to cash out with a ring, son.
Yeah,
So, if the Pirates were in position and, right now and next year was the go for it year,
you could
I,
make a
I,
case for it.
I
I'm
wouldn't
sure.
laugh at the situation.
Yeah.
But for right now, ho, ho, ho.
Right. 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 Greg Allen's probably a guy at this point. Um, I'm okay with washing my hands of pretty soon here.
Yeah.
I
So let's do that then. Then get Sawinski back up here
yeah.
or Swaggerty or whatever. Get them guys some reps. I don't know. Cal Mitchell, if you're going to keep him. Bring him up. Don't, whatever. But just leave him somewhere. Like, I kind of don't get, like, the back and forth thing. Maybe it's just because he takes it well. I don't really know, man.
Yeah. Well, they've done this now with Cal a good bit. Um, if Bly continues to struggle like he's doing right now, he's probably going to go back down.
Yeah.
So, And maybe that's a little bit of a concern too, is like, man, it's just we didn't even talk about Diego Castillo. What are we doing with him the rest of the year?
I mean, he's been
Um,
hitting in AAA pretty well.
right.
Hey,
Uh,
that's a good Van Meter right there, right? I mean,
yeah, I think right there is a good replacement. That
so
you know
if we
he
made those changes that we discussed, because pitching, I don't think it's there, not right now.
no,
Um,
no.
so
But those are three or four guys, Gary. I
yeah,
think we could
if you made
swap in
those
and out.
changes, it's marginally better.
Right.
I think they'd play a little better, but I mean, I just something
It's
else has happened. Something else broke. You know, I can't believe dealing Quintana does this much damage. I can't imagine dealing Vogelback does this much damage. But it sure feels like the sky is falling, man. Ever since the All Star break, it's just been brutal. And David Bednar, too. But we're talking about a closer, and they have not been failing in closing situations except for once during this miserable streak. So
yeah,
that's not it either.
no. But these are guys, whether they're playing or closing out games or whatever, they have a little bit more confidence to them in their abilities.
Yeah, yeah.
And when you have some young guys on a team and they're struggling, let's be honest, even for Brian Reynolds, this has been a tough year, even though miraculously you look at his numbers and you're like, man, they're actually not that bad.
No,
But it has been a grind for
it
Brian
has. He has
Reynolds.
battled through, and I'm just going to put it out in the universe. Let's not have another kid next year, Brian. Like, let's just play baseball next year, okay? Let's
Yeah.
take a break. Let's
Well, a couple things. That keeps him away from the minivan, first of all. He doesn't
right.
have to get the
We're
minivan.
still in Sudanville.
Right. So he gets to keep some of his dude card.
You could even
And
have a
then,
truck.
yeah, you can even, I mean, he looks like a truck guy
He's a
too.
truck
Yeah.
guy, I would have to
Yeah.
assume. Yeah,
Yeah. So, but I mean, Brian Reynolds has been fighting for his life this year, and
absolutely.
it has not been easy, which I think is a testament actually to him to have the numbers that he does. Yes, he struggled with runners in scoring position, but sometimes that just happens. I don't think that that's indicative of him in his career.
Yeah, Hayes has had a really bad year. I
Yeah.
mean, like, I think there's both with the glove too, like just the error numbers. And I know he's done some spectacular things, but come on. Even you defenders out there got to know that that's too many errors for Brian Hayes to make in a season, and he would be the first to tell you that
Brian
that's not
Hayes would argue with you that you're wrong. He shouldn't be making that many errors. Definitely.
absolutely. So now his brother, he might tell you that he
Oh,
should be able to make 40. But,
jeez.
the dude is not having his best season, you know?
And that's probably what we're looking at too, is like there's been a convergence of some bad here, right?
Yeah,
Um, individually, collectively as a team, record wise, they've had to trade a couple guys
right.
off. Uh, they haven't had to. They did trade a couple guys off. They've had some guys that, Bednar does make a difference whether he's, closing games or not.
Yeri De Los Santos, too.
Right. He's now on the 60 day. He's done for the year.
Yep.
So, these are just things that like it's not been pretty. We'll see how the rest of these last month and a half go. This last month and a half goes, but there's just been a real convergence of some bad,
Dude, fingers crossed, too, that Keller doesn't have dead arm.
right?
Because if he does, ho, 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 it's
Where
going
are
to get
those?
it's going to
Where?
get real fun. I mean,
Yeah,
we might see them stretching out Will Crow.
yeah. You're right. No, you're right. Tyler Beatty's going to be an ace here pretty soon at that point.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it just at some
The
point,
Keller, the Keller thing's another big thing. Like that happened too. Like it's been a lot. It's been a
yeah.
lot to deal with.
When you get to this point in the season, though, yeah, now it's about just answering as many questions as you can. getting through the war of attrition, you kind of hope that some of these kids start to come together a little bit. I just feel like right now they lack the glue to make it stick. So, and I think changing lineups constantly works with veterans. It doesn't work with kids. It screws with their heads, man. It really
Yeah.
does. You got to give them something to hold on to. You know, like if you send 10 people running at a wall and tell them to climb it, 9 of them might make it over, but one of them might need you to kind of like help them along and show them the footholds and everything and
Right.
make sure they get there. You know, like
Right. And a lot of people today like to throw out there with the batting order is like, well, it doesn't matter. Well, it matters because the players think it matters. So there is that expectation of wanting to come to the ballpark and knowing if you're playing and where are you playing and where are you batting. And
absolutely.
there's a consistency to baseball that I think is overlooked sometimes by people.
I miss it, man. I remember, when my friends were all busy, like on summer evenings, I'd go outside and play wiffle ball by myself, like throw the ball up in the air and like hit it. And I'd go through the Pirates lineup exactly in the order they always did. Like Wally Backman, Jay Bell, Andy Van Slyke, Barry Bonds, Bobby Bonilla, like straight through the lineup,
You
you
went
know.
straight killer bees,
Yeah, and I'd
killer
switch
bees.
hit both ways, like I'd do whatever they did. If Andy was lefty, so was I. Bonds. But you couldn't do that today. We just
No.
don't have the same lineup twice ever. And like, I just don't know how, as a player, I would feel about that. But
Well, and that's another thing that did happen the other night with taking it back to the Red Sox and the Eckersley
are
comments.
you going
Is
to
like,
talk about the little league position changes?
well, it was just a mess. Like everything was a mess that night.
What a
Like
circus!
it was,
I
and
think I
they and
tweeted out, like, if that's what happens when Brian Reynolds has to exit a game, you best lock him up, fool. I mean, because like, my God.
it got wild, and so I'm sure that didn't help things either because they had to move everybody around. I mean,
I honestly, I haven't seen something like that since spring training,
yeah,
or
you don't see that in a game seven, all hands on deck. We're emptying out the cupboard with relievers and pinch runners and defensive. I mean, like you
right,
wouldn't see it then, let
right.
alone. So it was
Well,
just another. It was
listen,
bad
I
timing.
feel like we're both about to like just deal a couple blows to Derek Shelton. We might as well make it a fresh segment because I think we have a couple Derek Shelton things to talk about, right?
I think so.
All right, let's take a quick one. All right, and we're back to the Pirates Fan Forum here on DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. Jim and Gary with you, and we're going to start by, I think we're going to have to just call it what it is. We're going to punt Derek Shelton around a little bit because I think the dude needs it. And we'll do it in honor of Presley Harvin because he is punting the hell out of the ball in practice, apparently.
And I'm not calling him Shelty no matter how many times you beg. So it's not happening.
Yeah, I'm not going to ever participate in that either. So he was on the fan, and they basically asked him like, "How secure do you feel about your job, Shelton?" Or Shelty, I guess, as they would say. And he said he's very safe, and he made it really clear that he was extremely safe. And I just had something to say in my head right away, and that was F that, sir.
Hmm. Yeah.
You don't get to feel safe. I mean, there's a lot of people on this team that don't have business saying that they're safe. They shouldn't be able to hit under 200 and feel safe. You shouldn't be able to have an ERA over 5 and feel safe. But there's a lot of people on this team that feel safe, and they really shouldn't. That rubbed me the wrong way, Jim. like hearing that from Derek Shelton, because I know he's not getting fired too. I've been telling people that he wasn't going to get fired, but I don't care if he's lying or not. You shut your damn mouth and say you don't know.
Yeah, I mean, or just say you're not going to get into speculating about that. I'm trying to do the best job
Yeah.
that I can.
Or
Say
that's something
any
for the off season.
Yeah, say anything, but I'm very secure. It came across to me as there was an aloofness to it.
Yeah.
Um,
Because you can explain why. You can explain why a manager who does back to back 100 loss seasons, and 3 if you really want to aggregate up 2020.
which would have most certainly been one.
Right. So if you want to go ahead and say that you're safe after that, I think that says a lot more than you think it says. To have the
It's
balls to say that on the radio to
it's
this
inc-
fan base.
it's incredibly tone deaf. And maybe he's a smart guy. Maybe if you asked him today, he'd say, "Yeah, that was not the best answer. I just answered it." That's what he would tell you in private. I hope so. I hope he wouldn't say the same if he had a chance to do it over that he'd say the same thing. Um, I can tell you maybe even as a player, I don't know if I'd appreciate hearing it all that much. Um,
Yeah,
so
I don't, man.
you
And
know,
and then you see him like in that game we were talking about where he changed like 9 guys in positions. You do little league things like that. Like we're beyond like whatever you were promised, dude. Like you're showing us like that you've never done this before.
mhm.
He does rookie things constantly. He gets things brought to his attention by the media, and it's almost an act of kindness that they're doing so because I never thought that I should not sit Brian and Cabrian on the same freaking day in the first homestand of the year.
Yeah,
Like
things that it's nice that he's candid about it, but
I don't
it's
need you to be Earl Weaver,
yeah,
but like, come on, dude. Like, there's some stuff that like the ball's been dropped. Made some bad calls on things as far as going to certain relievers at certain times where your arms were not tied behind your back.
well, and we can talk about how he handled the Reynolds ejection the other day.
Yeah, where was he?
It was a very tacit response to it. So now I think Reynolds, I, ironically, it was way more about accumulation of things that night than that call. But you're the manager. You can do whatever the hell you want there. Like, that situation. It's been building. He's your best player.
Get his back.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, managers go get tossed for a lot worse stuff than that.
Go out there, kick some dirt, scream about his birthday cake in his face for TV.
Put on a show.
Go back
If
down the
nothing,
tunnel, flip a table over, tell Brian he was balls on right,
mhm.
hit the showers, kid. They were against you all night, and then move on with your life.
Yeah, it probably was a missed opportunity there too. Um, and this idea that, well, he's still learning. Well, okay, it's this isn't 3 years ago.
I mean, I don't.
So again, I want to stress to people he doesn't have a ton to work with a lot of times.
Yeah, to sew it all
But
up, you saw the Jason Mackey piece today, where he was in the newsletter that he was writing for the press, the Post Gazette. He mentioned that Derek Shelton wasn't getting fired next year, which we all knew,
mhm,
and that he couldn't see them coming back with no changes, but he couldn't see it being Andy Haynes because he's only been here a year. So he suggested Oscar Marin would be the fire. Well, Oscar Marin's actually kind of made some progress, I feel, with the pitchers. Like,
yeah, as
I
the
don't
year
know
has
that I'm
gone
going to
on.
do that right now. I've always felt he was tied to Keller. I still feel like he's tied to Keller. And Keller had a hell of a turnaround this year, whether it was Marin or not.
Yeah, I mean, he's there. He should get some credit for it.
But he has a point. How do you come back from consecutive 100-loss teams with the same staff? You can't.
No, and but I will say that like there have been. It is not uncommon. It's not common, but it's not unheard of where teams just decide, especially at the hitting coach position, it's just not a good fit, or it
Yeah.
just has not worked, and they make a quick change.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're in for this time too.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I'm not rooting for anyone to lose their job, but I would just say from a sheer, what you're looking for in a performance standpoint, that sometimes with hitting coaches, you got to make quicker changes, and I have seen that from time to time in baseball over the years.
Well, I'm a rootin'. So let's go ahead and play the call your shot.
Yeah, let's do call your shot.
Hey, Gary and Jim. Looking at the contracts of Aaron Ashby and Michael Harris II, do you think those would be good starting points for the Pirates with Roansy Contreras and Oneil Cruz? As always, let's go Bucks.
All right, and we're back, and that was our friend Brandon Richards. And good question, man. Jim, you want to take this one first? What'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, he mentions Roansy and Harris from the Braves,
right?
And kind of what we're thinking about with extensions and whatnot. Yeah, I think day to day I could probably answer this one differently. When I look at a guy like Roansy, I think he's so young. It would be great to lock him up, but then I worry about what happens if he got arm problems, and then you're on the hook for some money.
And he's already had some. So
yeah. I mean, there have been nothing super scary, but enough that.
Well, I mean, he was on the shelf for, I think it was a little over 2 months last year with elbow soreness,
right?
Which that's not a good thing.
No. Oneil Cruz, what the heck would you do with him right now?
I don't know. Some people would tell you, just from what you're seeing, it's too early. Some people would tell you, okay, but even like maybe being 20% of what you think he can be, look what he's doing. Mm-hmm. At worst, he's Polanco. At best, he's, you got out in front of something like a Juan Soto potentially.
Mm-hmm. That to me is a tougher one than Contreras, to be quite honest with you.
I mean, I don't know what I would advise there. I mean, first, we could go down the road of will the Pirates do that sort of thing. I hope so. I think that's the only way that a team like the Pirates can truly ever compete is to lock up guys early on that they know are good through arbitration plus a couple of years.
Right.
And
the Braves certainly seem to have it figured out.
Sure.
But they've been a lot more sure about these guys too, I think.
Yeah, they've let them play too.
Yeah, out the gate. Well, and then they've performed.
Yeah, and they let them play. They didn't piss around with them. When they were ready, they were ready. They brought them up. They played them. They extended them.
Sure.
That's it. No games. No need for back and forth. If you're ready up here, you're up here. That's what they did with every single one of them, and they made good decisions. I respect the hell out of the Braves. I'll tell you, that's something I could never seen myself saying back in 1992.
No, that's a different era. You didn't. It was more of a hatred and a fear of the Braves than a respect for them back then.
The only thing I respected about the Braves back then was Terry Pendleton. That's it. Now, looking back through the prism of history, Greg Maddux, all of them. Mm-hmm. But the organization now, the way they've done things, smart.
Yeah.
Smart. To have everything they have with a payroll like $180 million is unbelievable. Unbelievably well-constructed team.
It is.
It's very tidy.
But the Pirates, they're in a different position. So And quite honestly, with Cruz, it's kind of funny. We're seeing the reverse of what happened with Hayes when we called him up. And he got that first taste and went nuts.
Yeah.
Cruz, it's kind of going the other way.
Right. He's showing you the warts first, almost.
Yeah. So it's an interesting, an interesting, what's the word I'm looking for? It's just flipped completely in reverse.
Yeah. So I mean, still, I think those are risks they're going to have to take. So I would suggest if you were to do Cruz, you'd want like 7-8 years right now for 80-90 million is what I'd offer, something like that.
Well, if you're certainly talking about maybe trying to get it on a little bit more reasonable scale, now would be the time.
Now's the perfect time, right? Because if he comes out next year and just rakes, just absolutely rakes, figures it out, hits 35, 40 home runs. I'm not predicting that. I'm just saying if he does that and hits like 260,
then you can double that contract.
Oh, easily. Yeah. Then, he's really probably played himself out of town. So it's a bet you can make and maybe you'll win. And if you don't, well, you're stuck with Polanco again. That's all. And maybe it's somewhere in between. Because let's not act like 10 million is ridiculous for somebody that's going to hit 25 home runs. It's not.
No, people here tend to think that that's too much. But
but you want to play big boy baseball and you want to advise big boy baseball, then
across baseball, that's just business as usual.
That's a risk you take.
Sure.
That's all. If not, he's probably a player you don't keep. You probably don't keep him past his arbitration years, which is why they held him back in the minors this year to begin with. So they're pretty much already showing you their top card.
Yeah,
you don't think we can keep this guy.
That's a good point. But yeah, if you were looking to approach him, now would be the time because he's probably more open to it than he would be if he came up and was just blistering the baseball all over the place.
Yeah. Now, Rowanzi, I mean, even if he does have arm trouble, which I'll go ahead and pencil it in.
Yeah, I think that's the thing.
I just think it's a rite of passage anymore, and I'm not wishing ill on the kid. I certainly, hey, whatever you worship, I'll do your cross for you. I don't want him to get hurt, but let's just say it happens. You sign that kid for 7-8 years. He's out for a year and a half rehabbing in that period of time somewhere. He's still a valuable arm. He's still somebody you're going to want around most likely. He's probably going to rehab pretty well. He's a hard worker, good trainer.
He's young.
Yeah, a lot of good things to like there. He might be around that same area, maybe a little less. He's probably closer to Hayes as far as, paychecks go. I would say.
I would say on the starting pitching front, if they do think Rowanzi is what he is, and I happen to think he is, and it's a risk on that side I'd be willing to take because we talk about needing some
hard to come by.
High-end starting pitching is hard to come by. If you think you have one, and I happen to think he is, then I would explore it.
I also think most starting pitchers, real good ones anyway, most of them, the ones that become really like legendary good, they're not good until that first period of time is over. After the arbitration, they're not really themselves. Like, look at Max Scherzer. Look how much better he was after he finished his arbitration cycle out with Detroit.
Yeah.
Look at how much better he got. Look at how much better a lot of players have gotten.
So, well, look at, even if you want to throw Mitch Keller in there, who is by no means completely arrived, but
sure,
a lot of growing
pains. Hitting arbitration.
Yeah,
so now you're going to get 3 more years of him, and you hope that he continues to progress. By that third year, if they don't have him signed, he'll probably be a pitcher that everybody really, really wants. He'll probably be Denny Nagel. This exact same progression took place with him.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of anybody like nowadays where he's Mitch Keller would get a nice payday.
Sure.
I mean, he would.
Yeah, and like Chad Cole was probably as close as we've come. to that sort of thing. He had worked his way back to a certain point where by ARB 3, he was an acceptable pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Now, you talk about the ceiling being higher for somebody like Rowanzi. Well, by ARB 3, he's probably a pretty darn good pitcher. You know,
Right.
the Indians have this same problem, so they have to extend guys like Shane Bieber, and you know they get out in front of it and try to extend them early, and then they sell off that back end of the ticket if the team's not going to be in contention, like Clevenger.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to go back to the question is yeah, I'd explore it. I'd explore it with both of them. There's definitely some risk with both of them. I mean, for altogether different reasons.
Yeah. That said, this is a team that, you know, they still haven't committed to their best player.
Right.
So, really, it's a great question because it's something that the Pirates should be thinking about. You're absolutely right to ask it. And yes, they absolutely should do everything in their power to look at teams like the Atlanta Braves and try to model themselves after them. But the reality is, until they do things that they already have on their plate and should have already kind of knocked off, to me, I'm not going to bother thinking about it.
It's a little bit it's a little bit wishful thinking until we see Ryan Reynolds with some ink dried on a contract and things of that nature.
Yeah, and that's just where it is. I wish it was better. I wish it wasn't such a dark show, but I can't help it. When things are bad, and we need to call a spade, and sometimes the team just needs hammered.
Well, yeah, and you know, let me just say this. This is how I'll leave it tonight. Is like, I think what has ended up happening too a little bit on social media is, and it's a shame, is I really don't think the fans hate the players. You know, like it's they're getting caught in the crossfire here, and there's some collateral damage there. I think, you know, when you go to the games, you don't hear, they're not booing the players. Like
right.
they're booing.
They only boo Mason.
Yeah, right. They're booing. This is past the players. The players are getting trampled on to hate Bob Nutting, and
right.
That's a shame. It creates a little bit of a toxic situation, but I truly don't think the fans are sitting here. And yes, there are a couple players that people don't like, but it's performance related. And I think by and large, this fan base appreciates the players in the sense that they're trying to do the best they can, but boy, they really don't like Bob Nutting, and they're getting trampled on a little bit. So just thought I'd add that that's kind of how I see it.
I mean, you're right. It's kind of like it's hard to classify what happens on social media because some people are there just to irritate people, you know. So you don't know what's actual opinion and what's just somebody trying to get their rocks off a little bit. But I would say for the most part, the players have been relatively off limits, except for the daily double of hatred. You know, Josh Van Meter has been a magnet all year. Yoshi was a magnet all year. And this last 3 weeks, anybody that they call up or replace or get off the waiver wire is an absolute target. It doesn't matter who they are, because at this point, everybody is sick of seeing other people's scraps. We have our own scraps. We should have our own guys up here.
Yeah, it's the symbolism of it more than anything.
Yeah.
More than the player itself.
Like, I'd rather see Cam View up here than Manny Benzuelos. And that's nothing against Manny per se. I actually think he's been kind of okay.
Yeah, he has been.
Yeah. But if we're not going to keep him, let's see Cam View. He's 29. Like, what are we doing here? You're not going to keep him on the 40, man. Like,
never.
Get him up here. Let's see. Maybe he's a bullpen lefty. You need one. He did okay when he was up here until you blew his arm out.
Yep.
Like, let's just use our own stuff. Let's stop getting other people's trash. Catcher was different. I know I made a big deal about Godoy and he was just this catcher, but they didn't really have a choice there. You know, another injury to Heineman, so be it.
Yeah, these guys like the Van Meters, the Yoshis, the new one will be Padlo, Kevin Padlo. They're a symbol. They're an idea of what's wrong. And I don't think anybody's going to the ballpark necessarily to boo Brian Reynolds and O'Neill Cruz and everybody wants them to do well.
They're the part of hodgepodge that makes it true. And the rest of them are what makes Eckersley ill-informed. Because if you're calling Cal Mitchell hodgepodge or Bly Madris hodgepodge, or that's different because they're kids. So of course you don't know who the hell they are. Right. Just like 90% of everyone else's fan base won't know who Tristan Cautious is when you call him up.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, he's just not familiar with the situation. So he was off. It's the right conclusion. It just was off how he got there.
Right. So I'll leave you with this before I toss it off to Ben this week. I think the Dennis Eckersley comments were A-okay for everybody to deal with. And I'll remind the Pirates that they could always make it untrue.
What? What? They can do something about it?
They could always make it a liar. Right? They could always fix it and make it go somewhere. How do people get a hold of you, brother?
So, Twitter all the time, and that has been a challenge of late. But you know, we're getting through it. It is at Jim Stamm 22 or for the city _412, and Penguins and Pirates and Pitt and Steelers. So we've got a lot of sports happening here in the next month or so.
Yep. And you know me, Gary MO2007 on Twitter. Check me out. I'm on Facebook too, but try not to be very often. Check out check out my other podcast, the H2P podcast on DK Pittsburgh Sports. It comes out every Sunday morning with Corey Christen. And until next week, and hopefully there's a few wins to report. Ben, take it away if you still have the energy, kid.
Yes, go,